And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted an autosave feature on your Drupal site's forms so content creators won't lose their work if they accidentally close the window or lose power? There's a module for that. It's called Autosave Form, and it was created in November of 2016 by Hristo Chonov of 1x Internet, who is also one of the organizers of this year's Drupal Dev Days in Burgos. It has an 8.x-1.4 version available, which works with Drupal 9 and 10, and it is actively maintained. In fact, the most recent commit to the branch was less than 3 months ago. It does have test coverage, and it has 38 open issues, 20 of which are bugs, which is pretty good considering the module is in use by over 6,400 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, the module works by automatically saving the content of the current form every 60 seconds, though the time period is configurable. When a user opens a form, if an autosave state exists for that form, a dialog will be shown asking if they want to resume editing or discard any autosaved states. Once a form is submitted, any saved states will be automatically deleted. And it's worth pointing out that it should work with both content entity forms and config forms, but the majority of development and testing has been with entity forms in mind. The project page also mentions an issue with nested entity reference inline forms and has links to relevant core issues. Also worth noting that this module uses Ajax to save the states to the Drupal database, separate from any entity revisions. Now, if you would prefer a solution that saves form states into the browser's local storage instead, you can check out the Save Form State module, which uses the jQuery Sisyphus plugin. Now let's talk about Autosave Form.
Auto-saving. I mean, I guess my question here is like, are people a fan of it? And if so, why?
I'm not a fan of it, so I'll start there. Like, it reminds me of like working on a Mac versus working on other operating systems, where when you work on a Mac, it's auto save by default. Anytime you type something in a document, everything's auto saved all the time, and that is always something that frustrated me. Even in my VS Code, I turn that feature off if it exists because I always want to control when I save something. So, but that's me. I could see how this could be valuable to somebody.
I think it's an interesting question because I feel like years ago there was some kind of a desktop publishing software. I think it was like one of the Adobe products that would do a similar thing where it would sort of have a separate autosave state. And then if you crashed or something like that and you relaunch the program, it would be like, hey, there's a save state. Do you want to go back to that? So I feel like this works sort of like that. I think ironically, probably most of us are used to using software that actually autosaves by default, which is things like Google Apps, where as soon as you make a change, it automatically saves those. And so it's actually doing a real autosave all of the time, not just sort of this like restore state the way Autosave Form does.
For me, it kind of depends on the product. I mean, I'm the opposite, Stephen. The first thing I turn on for VS Code is autosave because I mean, I use Git to store points in time that I want to save. But when I'm working on something, I want to be able to just refresh the page and see what's changed. Video games is another one. Like if a video game doesn't have autosave in general, that's particularly annoying because you can lose a lot of progress. But on websites, I've installed this, not this particular module, but modules like it a couple of times. And I found that if you have any sort of nested comment, which you mentioned in your preview, things can really get funky pretty quickly. So usually the people that want autosave have really complex architectures, and it's usually not going to work very well for them anyway without a significant amount of work. So I try to avoid it in Drupal where possible, but I can see why some people would like it.
I was just gonna say, I'm kind of with Steven. I'm kind of also with Nick. I guess if it works well and it's not a blocker, right, to folks, then great, more power to you. I will also say the video game analogy is interesting to me because even if a video game has autosave, when I'm done with or I'm at a point where I'm stopping or moving on, I still save it anyway because I don't necessarily always trust the autosave has auto saved. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm mixed on it. I kind of feel like if I can make that point in time to say I'm going to save this. I also wonder like what the resource usage is on like saving. Like if you're saving every 5 seconds or 10 seconds or that sort of thing. Like is that more of a resource impact on your web server?
Well, according to the product page, it actually uses sort of a separate save mechanism specifically to make it sort of a lighter load on the web application. To respond to one thing Nick said, I think that's an interesting point about people maybe wanting this on more complex applications. Because to me, if anything, I would see probably the ideal use case for this being some kind of a system, maybe even like an intranet or a portal, where you've got a lot of users who are probably less technically sophisticated, or maybe could be expected to have a lower level of training. And so they might be more likely to, do some work and then close the window without, scrolling down to the save button or something like that.
Yeah. I think like the thing that comes to mind when you say that, Martin, is like, and this is not necessarily editing content, but the block menu. Like how many times has somebody moved a block around or moved a couple of blocks around and then left the block layout page and then been like, oh, I forgot to hit save, right? That kind of likens to me in the content world to like paragraphs, right? You've managed a couple of paragraphs, you've forgotten to hit the save button because you have nested paragraphs and you're like, oh, I saved them out, right? So like there, I think it could be helpful where like you're doing that type of content change where it's like, hey, it may not be obvious to the person that they also need to hit the save button at the bottom.
Ironically, that paragraphs example sounds like it might be a case where this module actually doesn't work yet. So
so
because of the nested entities,
it wouldn't save the content type after like at some point. Like that's not like, I'm not saying it would save the paragraph, right? Like, oh, I'm on a paragraph, it's going to know to save that. I'm saying like the overall page that you're on editing that paragraph, right?
I think so, but it'd be interesting to know, if anybody has experience to maybe talk about it in the Talking Drupal channel on Drupal Slack.
Yeah, and I was going to ask what happens if you hit cancel.
It saves your changes anyway.
Yeah.
Are you like, talking about, Stephen, when
I moved these 5 blocks around, but you know what? Actually, I didn't want to do that. Sorry. Let me start again.
No, it auto saved 1 second before you reloaded the page. So you're hosed. That's actually a great use case too, if you think about it. Like, how often do you edit a page and then go, oh wait, maybe I don't want to do it this way,
exactly,
and then reload the page? Now, if you've auto saved it, you're kind of like, you got to rely on revisions at that point, right?
Yeah, that's my question. Exactly. Yeah.
No. I think you guys are misunderstanding slightly. So autosave saves a state of the change that you've made, but it doesn't publish them. It's just that if you make some changes, leave the page and come back, it'll say, hey, somebody was editing this. Do you want to start from where they were, or do you want to start over?
Oh, so it's doing it's doing a browser save, not a Drupal save.
No. This particular project places it in the database, but not in the node field database. It uses a separate cache. It's essentially caching the changes you've made.
Gotcha. But it's caching them to the database.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. So if I didn't hit save, they're not published to the node. Got it.
No. And if you come back in, it will ask you if you want to start from
Got
where
it.
that person
Okay,
was
so that makes
or start
sense.
over.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm with
John's
you.
making a funny face. So
sorry, I am. I'm like,
I actually like this. This is a good idea.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it now because I'm like, okay, so if I
we're sorry, John. We're learning that 2 of the 3 hosts don't listen to Martin's intros because you said this. That's why I know.
I was listening. I guess I just had thought that it would automatically save the page as if I had hit the publish or the save button at the bottom of the content, not in some sort of like draft state that I could go back to, which I mean, I guess is nice.
I think the particularly fun part too is that there's 3 modules called Autosave Form.
With different spaces in different places, right?
That's going to be a show. That's going to be a show topic at some point, like naming your module.
Well, thank you, Martin. If our listeners want to get in touch with you and have ideas for other modules of the week, how can they do that?
You can definitely reach out with a suggestion in the Talking Drupal channel in Drupal Slack, but they can also reach me with a direct message, anything Drupal or anything social as @manclue.